A chilling quiet settles over Oak Ridge Park as Nathan Reynolds, an African-American FBI agent, finds his peaceful afternoon shattered by an encounter that will change multiple lives forever. If you believe in justice and want to see how this story unfolds, subscribe to support content that matters. Officer Michael Thompson's 20-year career in law enforcement was about to come crashing down around him, all because of his own prejudices and one fateful decision. In the late afternoon sun, Nathan sat on a weathered bench, deeply engrossed in his book, the autumn breeze gently rustling the pages. The distant laughter of children playing created a peaceful backdrop to what should have been a moment of tranquility. Across the park, Officer Thompson patrolled with the confidence of a man who believed he knew his territory better than anyone else. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, years of ingrained bias clouding his judgment. When he noticed Nathan sitting alone, something in his gut stirred, a feeling he had learned to trust, or perhaps should have learned to question. "Never seen him around here before," Thompson muttered under his breath, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his holster. He stopped walking and watched Nathan, trying to justify the suspicion building in his mind. There had been reports of a suspect in the area, a vague, flimsy lead that Thompson would use to validate his approaching prejudice. Nathan felt the weight of Thompson's gaze and looked up from his book. He noticed the officer standing a distance away, staring at him with a look that was all too familiar, prejudice masquerading as concern, suspicion based on nothing but the color of his skin. But Nathan didn't flinch. Instead, he closed his book slowly, marking the page with his finger, and met Thompson's gaze with unwavering dignity. Officer Thompson's grip on his baton tightened as he observed Nathan's steady, unafraid demeanor. The lack of fear, the quiet confidence, it unnerved him. "Let's see what this guy's up to," Thompson muttered as he began walking towards Nathan, each step fueled by his own biases. If you believe in standing up against injustice, hit that subscribe button right now. Your support helps share stories that need to be told. As Thompson approached, Nathan maintained his composed demeanor, though inwardly he felt a familiar weariness. He had experienced this scenario countless times before, and he knew the next few moments would be crucial. The situation was already charged with tension, and his response could either defuse or escalate it. "Afternoon," Thompson said, his tone carrying a false politeness that barely masked his underlying suspicion. He positioned himself to loom over Nathan, a subtle assertion of authority. "Afternoon, officer," Nathan replied evenly, keeping his hands visible as they rested on his closed book. The leather-bound volume of classical literature seemed incongruous with Thompson's preconceptions. "What brings you out here today?" Thompson asked, his eyes scanning Nathan's face, then flicking to the book in his lap. He was fishing for something, anything to justify the feeling gnawing at him. "Just enjoying the park," Nathan responded calmly. "It's a beautiful day." Thompson nodded slowly, though he wasn't really listening. He was more interested in what Nathan wasn't saying, in what he could dig out from beneath the surface. "You from around here?" Nathan's slight smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been around." The non-answer didn't sit well with Thompson, who shifted his weight, his stance becoming more confrontational. "Mind if I see some ID?" Thompson demanded, his hand still resting near his weapon. Nathan's smile faded. This was the crucial moment, the point where things could spiral out of control. He knew his rights, knew he wasn't obligated to show ID just for sitting in a public park. But he also knew that refusing could escalate the situation dangerously. "Am I under arrest, Officer Thompson?" Nathan asked, his tone measured as he met the officer's gaze without flinching. The question hung in the charged air between them. Thompson bristled, his authority challenged by Nathan's calm inquiry. "You will be if you don't cooperate," he shot back, his hand now firmly gripping his holster. Nathan took a slow, deliberate breath, maintaining his neutral expression despite the growing tension. "I'm just sitting in the park," he stated evenly. "Is there a law against that?" Thompson's patience wore dangerously thin. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for," he declared, though even he recognized how weak the excuse sounded. He stepped closer, using his position to cast a shadow over Nathan. "And what description would that be, officer?" Nathan asked quietly, the question loaded with meaning that made Thompson's jaw tighten. He didn't have a good answer, and they both knew it. In the distance, a group of parkgoers had stopped to observe the confrontation, their presence adding another layer of tension to the scene. Some had already pulled out their phones, recording the interaction. Thompson noticed this from the corner of his eye, but rather than causing him to reconsider his actions, it only fueled his determination. "Don't get smart with me," Thompson snapped. "Show me some ID. Now." For a moment, the two men locked eyes, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Nathan knew he could push back, could assert his rights more forcefully, but he also knew that doing so could make this situation even more dangerous. If you believe in accountability and justice for all, take a moment to subscribe. Together, we can make a difference. Without a word, Nathan reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out his wallet. Thompson watched every movement with hawk-like intensity. His body coiled like a spring. When Nathan handed over his ID, Thompson snatched it from his hand, glancing at it dismissively. "Stand up," Thompson ordered, stepping back slightly. Nathan sighed inwardly but complied, rising slowly from the bench, keeping his hands visible. He towered slightly over Thompson, but maintained a non-threatening posture. "Turn around," Thompson commanded, pulling out his handcuffs. Nathan felt a surge of frustration but suppressed it, knowing that resistance would only make matters worse. He turned around, allowing Thompson to cuff him despite the growing audience of concerned onlookers. The patrol car's engine hummed as Officer Thompson drove Nathan Davis toward Riverside Precinct. Thompson's knuckles were white against the steering wheel, his jaw clenched tight. Something about Nathan's composure continued to unsettle him deeply. In the rearview mirror, he caught glimpses of his prisoner sitting calmly in the back seat, handcuffed but utterly unperturbed. "What were you really doing in that park?" Thompson demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. Nathan met Thompson's eyes in the mirror, his expression unreadable. "I told you, officer. I was reading." Thompson scoffed. "A guy like you just sitting around reading? You expect me to believe that? A guy like me?" Nathan repeated, his tone measured but pointed. "What exactly does someone like me look like, Officer Thompson?" The question hung heavy in the air, forcing Thompson to confront his own prejudices. Instead of answering, he turned his attention back to the road, his frustration mounting with each passing moment. As they pulled into the precinct parking lot, Officer Jenny Martinez was just finishing her shift. She glanced up at Thompson's arriving patrol car, then did a double-take when she recognized Nathan through the window. Her eyes widened in recognition, but she quickly masked her reaction. Thompson led Nathan through the main entrance, past the bustling desk officers and ringing phones. At the booking desk, Officer Kevin Reed looked up from his computer, his expression shifting subtly as he registered Nathan's presence. "What's this about?" Reed asked, his eyes flicking between Thompson and Nathan. "Suspicious activity in Riverside Park," Thompson replied curtly, handing over Nathan's ID. "Need to run his information." Reed examined the ID, then looked back at Nathan, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "You'll want to take this to Captain Anderson," he said carefully, returning the ID to Thompson. "The captain?" Thompson asked, confusion evident in his voice. "Why would Dash?" "Trust me," Reed interrupted. "She'll want to handle this personally." Thompson's unease grew as he led Nathan toward Captain Rebecca Anderson's office. The whispers and stares from other officers didn't help matters. Something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on what. Captain Anderson looked up from her paperwork as Thompson knocked on her door. Her sharp eyes took in the scene before her, Thompson's rigid posture and Nathan's calm demeanor. Her expression remained neutral, but there was a glint of recognition in her eyes. "Officer Thompson," she said evenly, "care to explain why you've brought Mr. Davis to my office in handcuffs?" Thompson began recounting the incident, but with each word, he felt less certain of his actions. Captain Anderson's expression grew increasingly stern as he spoke. "Remove those handcuffs," she ordered when Thompson finished. "Now." Thompson hesitated but complied, the click of the handcuffs echoing in the quiet office. Nathan rubbed his wrists, his dignity intact despite the ordeal. "Officer Thompson," Captain Anderson said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "do you know who you've just arrested?" Without waiting for an answer, she continued, "This is Special Agent Nathan Davis of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The color drained from Thompson's face as the reality of his situation crashed down around him. He looked at Nathan with new eyes, seeing not the suspicious character he'd invented in his mind, but a highly respected federal agent. If you believe in accountability and justice for all, don't forget to subscribe. Together, we can make a difference in this world. "Captain, I didn't." Thompson's voice trailed off as he realized there was no excuse that could justify his actions. "Step outside, Officer Thompson," Captain Anderson commanded. "We'll discuss this further in a moment." As Thompson left the office, his world spinning, Captain Anderson turned to Nathan. "Agent Davis, I apologize for this incident. I assure you it will be thoroughly investigated." Nathan nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Captain. But this isn't just about me. It's about every person who looks like me who doesn't have an FBI badge to protect them." The weight of his words settled over the office. Captain Anderson knew this incident would have far-reaching consequences for her department, and rightfully so. Outside, Thompson leaned against the wall, his career flashing before his eyes. 20 years of service, and in one moment of prejudiced judgment, he had jeopardized everything. Captain Rebecca Anderson sat behind her desk, the weight of the impending investigation pressing down on her shoulders. The stack of witness statements from Riverside Park painted a damning picture of Officer Thompson's conduct. Body camera footage played silently on her computer screen, documenting every moment of the confrontation. If you believe in creating positive change in our law enforcement system, subscribe now. Your support helps shed light on important stories that need to be told. "Send him in," Anderson called out, her voice firm but tired. Officer Thompson entered her office, his usual confidence replaced by nervous uncertainty. The past week of administrative leave had taken its toll. His uniform wasn't as crisp, dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Sit down, Michael," she said, using his first name for the first time in years. "We need to discuss the findings of our preliminary investigation." Thompson sank into the chair, his shoulders heavy with the burden of his actions. "Yes, Captain. The witness statements are unanimous," Anderson began, her tone measured. "You approached Agent Davis without probable cause. You escalated a peaceful situation. You made assumptions based solely on his appearance." "Captain, I was following protocol." Thompson started. "Were you?" Anderson cut him off sharply. "Was it protocol that made you approach a man reading quietly in a park? Was it protocol that made you assume he was suspicious despite no evidence of wrongdoing?" The silence that followed was deafening. Outside the office, the usual bustle of the precinct continued, but inside, time seemed to stand still. "The review board meets tomorrow," Anderson continued. "Agent Davis will be there. This is your opportunity to address your actions directly." Thompson's face paled. "Captain, please. 20 years on the force. My record. Your record doesn't erase what happened in that park," Anderson interrupted. "This isn't just about one incident, Michael. It's about a pattern of behavior that we can no longer ignore." The next morning, the review board convened in the precinct's main conference room. The tension was palpable as Thompson sat before the panel of senior officers, internal affairs representatives, and at the far end, Nathan Davis himself. "Officer Thompson," the head of internal affairs began, "walk us through your decision-making process that day. What made you single out Agent Davis?" Thompson struggled to find words that wouldn't incriminate him further. "I observed a subject who matched a general description. What description?" Nathan's calm voice cut through the air. "Be specific, Officer Thompson. What exactly about me matched your suspect's description?" The room fell silent as Thompson's prejudices were laid bare. He couldn't admit the truth, that it was Nathan's race alone that had triggered his suspicion. If you believe in accountability and transparency in law enforcement, take a moment to subscribe. Change starts with awareness. I made a mistake, Thompson finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I let my assumptions, my biases, cloud my judgment. Nathan leaned forward, his presence commanding attention. Officer Thompson, this isn't just about me. I'm lucky, I have a badge, I have authority. But what about those who don't? What about the countless others who face the same treatment without the protection I have? Thompson couldn't meet Nathan's eyes. The truth of his words struck deep, forcing him to confront the real impact of his actions. The review board's decision was unanimous. Officer Michael Thompson's employment with the department would be terminated, effective immediately. But more than that, the incident would spark a department-wide reform in training and accountability. As Thompson cleared out his desk later that day, Captain Anderson watched from her office. 20 years of service ended because of deeply rooted prejudices he'd never bothered to examine. It was a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. 3 months after Officer Thompson's termination, Riverside Precinct had undergone significant changes. Captain Rebecca Anderson stood before a room of officers, both veteran and rookie, addressing the latest reforms in their training program. The events of last fall opened our eyes, she began, her voice carrying across the attentive room. They showed us that wearing a badge doesn't make us immune to prejudice. It doesn't shield us from our own biases. If anything, it makes confronting those biases even more crucial. At the back of the room, Nathan Davis listened quietly. He had become a regular presence at the precinct, working closely with Anderson to implement new training protocols and accountability measures. If you believe in the power of transformation and want to see more stories of positive change, subscribe now. Together, we can make a difference. The new training center, renamed the Justice and Equity Institute, stood as a testament to the department's commitment to change. Interactive workshops replaced outdated lectures. Body camera footage from real incidents, including Thompson's fateful encounter with Nathan, served as teaching tools for what not to do. One afternoon, as Nathan was leaving the precinct after another successful training session, he spotted a familiar figure across the street. Michael Thompson, now working as a security consultant, stood hesitantly at the corner. Their eyes met, and after a moment's consideration, Nathan crossed the street. Mr. Thompson, Nathan greeted him, his voice neutral but not unkind. Agent Davis, Thompson replied, his voice carrying the weight of the past months. I've been doing a lot of thinking. That's good, Nathan said. Thinking is where change begins. Thompson nodded, struggling with his words. I'm working with community programs now, teaching security teams about bias awareness, using my experience, my mistakes, to help others do better. Nathan studied the man before him, not the proud, prejudiced officer he'd encountered in the park, but someone humbled by their own failings and trying to grow from them. That's a start, Nathan acknowledged. It's not about punishment, Mr. Thompson. It's about progress. Back inside the precinct, Captain Anderson reviewed the latest statistics. Complaints of racial profiling had decreased significantly. Community trust was slowly rebuilding. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The hardest part of change, she told her officers during their morning briefing, is admitting we need it. But once we embrace that truth, real transformation becomes possible. If you believe in the power of accountability and reform in law enforcement, subscribe to support these important conversations. Nathan's experience had catalyzed change beyond Riverside Precinct. His story became part of police training programs across the state. The incident that could have been just another statistic instead became a turning point, a reminder that real change starts with individual actions and spreads through systematic reform. As Nathan left the precinct that evening, he paused to watch the sunset over the city. The same park where everything had started was visible in the distance, its trees swaying gently in the breeze. He thought about all the others who had faced similar situations but lacked his protection, his authority. Their stories drove him to continue his work, to push for more changes, to ensure that one day, everyone could sit in a park and simply read a book without fear. The path to change was long, but with each step, each reform, each mind open to new understanding, they moved closer to the justice system they aspired to create. And that made every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable truth, worth confronting. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city streets. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth and change. But for now, Nathan knew they were moving in the right direction, one honest conversation, one policy change, one transformed mind at a time.